Looks like we've got some people on, so I guess I can start talking. Today is the 26th of July, I think, 2022. I'm Roy Potter. Welcome as you come in. I thought I would come on today. I've actually been camping and doing some other things with family and friends, and we're going to be doing some more of that. So I don't know how often I'll get up. I know it's been kind of rare here lately. I might post a picture uh, of the camping trip from this last weekend. It was raining and everybody else was staying in RVs. I stayed in a tent because to me camping isn't camping unless you're in a tent. So I stayed in a tent and actually I did pretty well, but it rained quite a bit. I didn't get too wet. I was wearing a poncho and my tent held up and kept everything dry. So it was actually pretty fun, actually. It reminded me of some of my Army days. Anyway, hello everyone as you come in. I see a lot of people telling me I'm 5 by 5. I appreciate that. Let me get to the heart of the matter here so that in case it gets interrupted, as it often does, at least I'll be able to get this much information out. You know that I'm not a Putinist. I'm not a Russophile in the sense that, I like that style of government that they have there, although despite the difficulties that type of government presents, look at ours and what they're doing, not only to the world, but to our own people, to Americans, what our government, our U.S. government does to our own people. And the types of immorality, illegality, unconstitutionality, thievery, thuggery that goes on here, and yet our government wants to point fingers at Russia, and especially Putin. However, even though I'm not a Putinist and I'm not a Russophile, I'm also not a lover of the lies that come out of D.C. and out of people that wave the American flag and say my country right or wrong, et cetera, et cetera. I have never been that way. Even when I was younger, I was not. I consider it important that America really did be a shining light on a hill, not this debased den of debauchery that we've become today, and of empire building and the murder of people around the world for our own gain. I'm not for that at all. And I've been accused of being a Putinist and a Russophile because I stood up and I said these things. And of course, some of those people that have come after me on that have quite a bit of horsepower. They've been in the White House, they've been in the government, et cetera, et cetera. But I've never cared about that. I'm going to speak what I feel, and especially when it's based. Yes, I know about 4350, Bill H.R. 4350. Yeah, that's what I mean. They're coming after us. But let's not get off the subject at hand, okay? Subject at hand is what I've been talking about for quite some time, about this entire thing about Russia and Ukraine and what's really going on. The powers that be in the Western democracies, so called, point the finger at Putin and Russia because they've never liked Russia. Russia is the seat of the Caucasus. It's the seat of some pretty important things in history. And in fact, Russia's never really been conquered from without, it's always been from within. Just as we saw the Western corporations and governments seated in D.C., New York, and London financed Lenin to take down the Russian monarchy back in 1917, and then instituted this horrible situation that the Russians had to suffer through until 1990 or so, and to some extent today, but much less so. Still oligarchs, still criminals, but we want to point fingers at their oligarchs and their criminals, and we won't do it to our own. Look at what's been happening in our country. Okay, look who they're throwing in jail for the January 6th things as compared to what's happened elsewhere, and who in seats of power or close to seats of power are getting away with crimes. So at any rate, I've been watching Russia for a number of years, back during the Cold War years, and even up somewhat through the 90s and early 2000s, Russia did not have a really strong military. It was a lot of painting a picture. And our own government was very much into that because they needed an enemy, and Russia was that enemy. Always to keep, it's this thing just like in 1984, keeping us believing that there's an enemy out there, even if there wasn't one. As I've often said, Russia could have been our sister country and still should be. But at any rate, the Russian military wasn't the big threat that was claimed by the United States and NATO. Uh, it was just a convenient enemy to basically occupy Europe after World War II. The bases we have in Germany and throughout Europe and actually throughout the world are not there to protect the people of those countries. We are occupying those countries as an empire. And if nobody understands that, it's unfortunate. But that's really the way the situation is. So we've had all these terrible things happen in the United States over the last couple of years, especially. I'd go further back than that, but let's keep it close at home here right now, close to the current events. And as we started to realize that we had been had on some of these things, which shouldn't have been a problem up front, all of a sudden this Russian thing pops up. Now, I'm not saying that Putin isn't being manipulated by very powerful forces, but as I've said in the past, I don't think so. I think Putin is his own man. I think Putin is a guy who loves his people, who loves the Russians and that culture and the Russian Orthodox Church, et cetera, et cetera. I don't think he's putting on a show there and acting on behalf of the objectives of Klaus Schwab, uh, the Western banking system, the United States, NATO, um, the UN, or the New World Order. And I've said that from the start, since all of this happened over the last couple of years. His stand against, actually, it's been about 10 years. His stand against ISIS back in the 2014-15 time period when we were financing and helping ISIS, particularly in Syria, and Putin stood against that. As you possibly know, I was in a demonstration against what the U.S. was doing and supporting Putin fighting ISIS when we did the demonstration at Nellis Air Force Base, and maybe some of you are aware of that. I've mentioned it before. I showed you a T-shirt at one time where it says Putin. He has his sunglasses on, and he says "New World Order, Niet." Okay, looks like this thing is jumping around a little bit, and I'm sorry about that. It's just kind of typical, when I'm trying to do something. But anyway, let me get through this. So I've said that I did not believe, as so many people have been trying to intimate or believe or push, that Putin is actually just another wing of this New World Order, and that what he is actually doing is helping Schwab, et cetera, and that because he was in the WEF, he is somehow still affiliated with them. Well, unlike Tulsi Gabbard, Putin has come out against the WEF, against Klaus Schwab, against the entire situation with the Great Reset in the New World Order, or as Biden is now calling it, the liberal world order. You won't do that unless you're serious, and I think Putin is serious. I don't think this is a drama or a play. Okay, I don't believe that. However, they are using him to further take down the United States, but that's our own fault. It's not Putin's fault. Putin's just taking advantage of the situation. I don't blame him. We're an evil, illegitimate, immoral government in the United States that has done more damage to the world than it's done good, at least in the last 60 years, maybe longer. So Putin's wanted to pull out about that, and I pointed out that with all of the things that he's doing financially and economically, and also going after trying to protect Russians in Ukraine that have been persecuted and warred against for the last 8 years, since 2014, and really longer than that. He went in there because he saw the corruption. I think he knew about the biolabs, for for instance, obviously. He could see the corruption go on there. Biden himself was paying off, as we saw when he gave his little talk to the CFR, that they were paying off the government there to stop the prosecution of Hunter, for instance. That's just an example. So, as I've said, a couple of things here, and then I'll move on. Boy, this thing's really jumping around. This is bad. Hopefully, it's 5x5 and it's not doing too much in that way. Here where we get these interferences. But at any rate, so my take on all this is that Putin is serious. I'm not necessarily liking the fact that the BRICS includes China. I'm not really happy about that. If you know what the BRICS is, it's the financial grouping. It's the counter the Western financial system, particularly the petrodollar. Uh, we could have avoided all this by being the United States. I mean, we could have avoided all of this by being honest and not trying to build empires ourselves and then pointing our fingers at others saying that they're trying to build empires when that was obviously not the case. But that's how our corrupt government works, and it's a shame, and it's going to be our destruction. Okay. But at any rate, so I said that Putin was not going along with the WEF and the New World Order, and that he was breaking away from it. And everything that's happened in the last 6 months, 8 months, 7 months has proven that. And just the other day, he gave a speech, which I have included a commentary from Alexander Mercouris in the description box below. There's about a, 30, 35 minute, 40 minute explanation of Alexander Mercouris. And in there I say, the information on Putin starts at about the 25 or 28 minute mark. You'll see it in the description box below. And Mercouris is referring to Putin's speech that he gave to a Russian news agency, collection of news people. And then below that is another link of the actual Newsweek article that discusses what Putin said. And it probably has some twists in it, but I think basically the information there is pretty good. What's the point? Putin comes right out and says that he stands against the Klaus Schwab liberal world order, and that the globalist system has destroyed basically much of the world at this point, and is planning on doing more, and is causing many people to suffer, and that these famines, as I've often said, are political in nature. It has nothing to do with what's happening with this idiocy of the world heating up. Read between the lines. I'm going to be careful here so I don't say too much. All this difference in the way that the world's climate works, which it's always been changing from the very beginning. That's part of what this world is that. But those that are evil have been using these things against us in horrible, horrible ways. And we haven't even seen the end of it yet. But Putin stood up and said, no, you're not going to do that to the Russian people. You're not going to continue this corruption on my border, which is endangering our security there in Ukraine and killing those innocent people down there who have Russian genes in their population. They're actually Russians. We're going to go stop this. I've tried to negotiate with the United States and NATO all these years. They're not listening. They're pushing. I'm pushing back. And frankly, I don't blame him. So I want you to go listen to Alexander Mercouris. The link is in the description box below on his explanation. And the most important part is the Putin speech, starting, like I said, around 28 minutes, I think, of Mercouris's explanation. And then the Newsweek article that I have the link to below that. Hopefully I don't get taken down for any of this, but, it's possible. Is Putin a good man? I'm not even going there. As I pointed out in the past, men who aren't necessarily good, countries that aren't necessarily good, are sometimes used to punish those who are even worse, who have the light of God in them, but have turned their backs to it, as the United States and NATO and the Western democracies have. And we can see that prima facie across the board. The evil The immorality, the illegality is evident in the Western democracies. It is not the case. I'm not saying it's not in Russia, but it's not promulgated and pushed the way it is. As Isaiah said, their sin is as Sodom. They hide it not. They just do it out in the open. And that goes for everything, not just what might be considered the sexual agenda. Okay? So Putin's standing against that. I think he's genuinely doing it. Could the New World Order and Klaus Schwab and the Rothschilds, etc., be trying to use him to take down the Western freedom, liberty-loving peoples? Not the governments. I mean, the governments are what they're going to go after. But it's actually, as I've said before, we're the target. The people are the target. Does Putin care about us? Is he doing this to save us? No. I don't believe that. He's doing it to save his own people and those who will join hands with them in confronting the evil that exists in the United States, Britain, Western Europe, Australia, New Zealand, etc. Again, if you don't understand history, you might not really know what I'm talking about. But I'm giving you a quick overview, okay? The second thing I said is that Russia their military now has moved beyond, has for several years, actually a decade or more, moved beyond the difficulties they had in the Soviet Union and on up through the 90s and the early 2000s. They've moved beyond that. And I saw their equipment. I know how poor it was back then. That's not the case anymore. Yes, they still have some older systems, but they've also been improving those. They've been improving the systems they had. I could go over the air defense systems, for instance, but I think McCurris does a good job of that, as does the new Atlas, as does the Jacob Drazen report, as I've talked about, and of course the Duran. I've explained all of those before, and you should know about those by now if you want to keep up on those. And there are more. Colonel Douglas McGregor, which I constantly talk about, and he has his own YouTube site now where he puts up some of the highlights of his interviews. You could go there. These are the people that are actually telling you the way it is. New Atlas has a real bent towards China, which I don't go along with for a lot of reasons, but I understand where he's coming from. I understand why he says what he says. Other than that, his information is very accurate. That's Brian on there, who used to be known as Tony Cartolucci. His name is actually Brian. I forget his last name now, but New Atlas, good information. I just don't quite go along with the Chinese his affection for China. I'll put it that way. And it's probably due to the fact of where he is, and maybe what he sees is even a little more different than what I do. But at any rate, I said that the Russian military had improved, and that in a real fight, in a real high-intensity war, they would kick our ass. They would kick NATO's ass, and which would include the United States. I've said that. And we're seeing what happens to NATO-trained troops in Ukraine right now, despite all the fortifications on the eastern Donbass, etc., on up through Kramatorsk, which hasn't been taken yet. But I'm certain, as the commentators I've mentioned to you have said, that it's imminent. It's going to happen. And so the thrust will now be who's going to be the new boogeyman, so that the people in the U.S. and in London and in Brussels and the WEF, of course, can make excuses for what's happened and then move on to another emergency, as we see constantly coming up these days. We need to ignore those and go about our life and do our things with our families and friends and do our businesses and not fall for that. But the point is, the Russians are making headway. They're being meticulous. I was a little critical of Putin and the Russians at first when I saw that, and I said that they better not dilly-dally, but I understood the problems that they were going to have to confront in the Donbass with getting through the fortifications that the Ukrainians, with NATO's help and the U.S.'s help, have been building for the last 8 years. I understood that. My concern is, I think most of you who know, who have been listening to me, was that Russia was not really going in and attacking in depth to the logistical trains. That's what I was worried about, and we've seen that with the HIMARS system, which has been coming in. It's not going to make a big difference or any of the other weapon systems, which, by the way, apparently are being sold, not just HIMARS, but a lot of things. You heard about the Ukrainian cargo plane that went down. Apparently, it had some weapons supposedly headed to Bangladesh or someplace like that, and it crashed. Uh, Now, that's all a cover story. I'm sure that they're still selling weapons. They're getting the weapons that we're sending them to them, and they're selling them around the world. And our politicians are making money off of the black market and off of their supposed human rights organizations and relief organizations that they have stock in, that then gives them money back into their own pockets, and of course the CIA, etc. We've seen how all this works. It's all a lie, and Putin's saying, no, I'm not putting up with it anymore. Okay, we're drawing away. The liberal world order is evil, and it's destroying good nations. And he's talking about going back to sovereign states, sovereign nations that have nothing to do with these conglomerates which try to take over the countries and enslave their peoples. So it's coming right from Putin's mouth. Those of you who want to believe that he's just putting on a show and that he's really still a puppet, I think you better rethink that, considering what we're seeing, okay? And Russia is going to probably end up having to take all of Ukraine at this point. I don't think that was their original intent. I do not believe that. I think they did think that the U.S. would see that they're serious and would back down to some extent, and NATO. But they're not, because we have fools in the government and we have people that have a death wish for the earth, okay, in power. Blinken, Biden's just he's an empty suit. But people like Blinken and the people in the military-industrial complex, the Pentagon, certainly the State Department, and of course London, Klaus Schwab, etc. They have an agenda, and it's not in our best interest. So Putin, I think, is fighting them for real. So I'll just leave you with that now. The black market, how's that going? Apparently pretty well, because they keep voting to send more money to Ukraine. There's an old Army statement: you reinforce success, not failure. What they're doing is they're lying about the success the Ukrainians are having in order to keep the money going. So they're reinforcing failure, claiming that there's success. It's all wrong. It's all evil. And the bottom line is it's destroying you Americans, and of course the people in Western Europe and Australia and New Zealand, etc. That's what they're after. The salt of the earth is in a few places, and they're destroying those places and the ability for those people to take care of themselves. Does it make any sense that we shut off our energy production here in the United States and we go to Saudi Arabia to try to get it? Or Venezuela? If pumping oil is bad for the world, why would we even go get it? You see, the whole thing's a lie. And our electrical grid system in no way can sustain everybody charging electric vehicles. It can't handle what it's got now. So the obvious point here is it has nothing to do with going to electrical green energy. It has to do with destroying your ability to make a living, to stay alive, to travel, and to be independent. That's what it's about. Bottom line. So basically putting a cap on all this, summarizing it, again, Russia's come a long way. They're decent people. It looks like, the old statement: how do you know if they're good, if someone is good or bad? How will we tell if they're good or bad? By their fruits you will know them. And if you compare the fruits of the Western democracies, Western Europe, particularly NATO and the United States and Britain, if you compare their fruits to the fruits of the Russian people, the Russian people have much better fruits, worlds ahead of us. So I'm judging Putin and his people by their fruits, because that's what Jesus said. He said, they asked, well, what do we do? What do we do here? And he says, first of all, be not deceived. And then how will you judge it? By their fruits you will know them. Not their race, not the color of their skin, not their ethnicity or what nation they're in, but by what they do. And it's staring everybody in the face right now. Does that mean that Putin is, the second coming of Christ? No. But of course, you do know that I have a different understanding of what that means in the terms of the Hebraic idea. And again, before I end on that note, I want to again encourage you to go to the description box, listen to Alexander Mercouris, and also look at the Newsweek article. If you can find it, I'm not sure the link is in any of that, but you should go listen to Putin's speech, and you'll see what I'm talking about. The guy has it together, okay? He has it together. All right, pushing all that aside, Russia's kicking NATO's ass. It's going to continue that way. NATO might try, and the U.S. might try to open up another front in Poland. They tried in Lithuania. Apparently that didn't work. But Poland's still a problem. We'll see how all that goes. Again, it's not Putin's intention to go into Poland. This is the United States and London, Britain trying to push this. Okay, that's them. Just keep that in mind. Okay, putting all that aside, later tonight I plan on doing another live stream, and it's going to touch on this whole idea of the second coming, the one like the Son of Man, and what those actually probably mean in the original Hebrew, not as it's come down into the Hellenized versions in the New Testament, and in particular modern day Christianity. Some of you will enjoy the discussion. Some of you won't want to have anything to do with it. Others might be saying, well, what are you talking about? Well, come along tonight. I think it's probably going to be around 6, maybe 7 Mountain Time. I'm not sure right now, but keep your notifications on if they work. I know a lot of times they don't. And we're going to have a little discussion about that. I've talked about what coming in the clouds of heaven actually meant in the times of Enoch and of the first century, especially the Dead Sea Scrolls, folks. I've talked about that before. It really isn't the concept of the rapture and the coming of Jesus on a white horse galloping with his thousands, back here. I mean, if he comes back on a horse, that right there will tell me he ain't the right one, okay? That was all imagery of the past. It doesn't have anything to do with reality. It's imagery. It's prophetic imagery. That's how they do it. So we'll go ahead and go now. Again, sometime tonight we're going to talk. I'm not going to have a whiteboard up. I'm actually going to just use the map here when I come on tonight. And we'll just have that discussion. I'm not going to write down Hebrew, all that. We're just going to talk about some things. I'm going to read some things, and we'll talk about this, what this Son of Man is as compared to one like the Son of Man. There's a big difference, a very big difference. The Son of Man and one like the Son of Man. And when you look at Enoch, and you look at Daniel, Ezekiel, and Deuteronomy, and you put all this together, you kind of start seeing what the real deal is here, okay? I'm not looking for somebody coming in the clouds of heaven. I'm not saying that, as far as, coming down out of the sky. I think it's something quite different than that. I wouldn't object if it was that, but that's not how it's worked in the past. That's not what the scriptures actually say, and I think it'll be interesting for us to have a little discussion about it. You can agree, disagree, be totally neutral. That's okay. The point is that it's really important to talk about these things, but it will be primarily a spiritual discussion. I'm going to say it again here. I'm not saying that Putin is some Christ figure. I'm not saying that. Although he's doing some really spectacular things. I think he has repented of his KGB past. I think it's real obvious. And I think he's really concerned about his own people. He can't be concerned about the whole world. He said something once. He said, I am the president of Russia, not the world. Wow. Okay, everybody, so we'll try to see you tonight, okay? Everybody have a good day. Again, probably 6 or 7, right around there, I'm hoping, Mountain Time, okay? All right. Everybody take it easy. Make sure you go to the description box and see what's going on there, okay? Out here.